Good morning, everyone. My name is Tajuddin Ahmed, and I'm the chairman of the Programs Committee of Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, NBCC. I'm pleased to welcome you all to this virtual session of the NBCC edition of Next Generation Series, themed ESG Perspectives of the Next Generation. I'm particularly delighted to see our Council and ESCO members, our distinguished speaker, Ms. Rukaya Al-Rufai, and our moderator, Mrs. Inia Bimbola, and all our esteemed guests. Please rise as you observe the national anthems of Nigeria and Britain. Thank you for the two national anthems. Please allow me to state some of the rules for the event. Number one, if the volume is too low, kindly check your system volume. This event is being recorded and will be available live on our YouTube channel, Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, NBCC. To comment and have discussions, please use the chat icon. And to submit your questions during the session via the Q&A session. Only these will be answered during the question and answer session. Thank you all for listening. Finally, please join me as we welcome our President and Chairman of Council, Ms. Bisi Adeyemi, to give our welcome address. Madam President, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of council, members of ESCO on the call. I'm indeed very pleased to welcome you to the second edition of our Next Generation series, which is themed ESG, Perspectives of the Next Generation. You will agree with me that in the past few years, investors are paying particular attention to integrating environmental, social, and governance factors into their investment analysis. More so, the confluence of increasing government regulations, consumer pressure, tight labor markets, and environmentally driven volatility of supply chains are consistently driving companies to focus on environmental and social causes. In recent times, millennials and Gen Z have become significant advocates in this regard. We see them using social media to hold brands accountable on ESG practices. According to a 2020 report by First Insight, 73% of Gen Z consumers surveyed were willing to pay more for sustainable products than every other generation. It is noteworthy that this generation makes up a large proportion of today's and indeed tomorrow's workforce and will continue to demand accountability from large corporates. Today, we are honored to have joining us sustainability experts and thought leaders as they share with us insights and strategies of next-gen ESG. I'm delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Mrs. Rukaya El-Rufai, PwC Nigeria's lead on sustainability and climate change and public sector risk assurance services. She has advised a broad range of public and private sector clients on issues across the sustainability value chain in Nigeria, as well as supporting transformational agendas and efforts towards the actualization of UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our moderator today is Mrs. Inia Bimbola, founder, Thistle Praxis Consulting Limited, and the vice chair of the NBCC British Business Committee. She's a business executive with over 20 years of experience working in international development space with broad consulting experience and expertise in corporate governance, management consulting, sustainability development, communications and strategy. She advises boards, executives, governance risk and sustainability practitioners toward social, environmental and economic innovations that create shareholder and business value. I sincerely thank the programs committee led by the chair, Mr. Tajuddin Ahmed, for putting this event together. And I thank the HQ for their support in also putting this together. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention. And now I have the pleasure of handing over to Mrs. Abidwala. Over to you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Chair. Thank you, our President as well, and the entire team at NBCC. It's a delight to join you this morning, and I hope all our participants that you will find this useful today. I would like to welcome my speaker for today, Rukaya El-Rufai, who is a partner with PwC. Thank you for joining us. This morning, we're talking about ESG, perspectives for the next generation. And I think that for those of us that are joining, we have some level of experience or some level of understanding about what ESG is. It stands for environmental, social, and governance. And these are pillars within the ESG frameworks and represent the three main topic areas that companies are expected to report in when they talk about issues of ESG. The goal of ESG is really to capture non-financial risk and opportunities that are inherent in the company's day-to-day operations. So typically, there are issues that are surrounding environmental, social, and governance issues that companies who are interested in sustainability will take on and report. And whether we like it or not, ESG is here to stay. It is not a matter of something that is trending and will go off. Because our world currently, faces a lot of challenges. The climate change is true. There's a transition for most economies from a linear economy to a circular economy. We have increasing inequality, whether economical or financial or even socially. And so being able to balance economic needs and societal needs are also issues that are very pertinent and important on the agenda of businesses and individuals as well. And then, of course, investors are also interested in these issues. Regulators are interested in them, as well as, consumers. As the president said, the younger generation is also looking at investing in sustainable products and services. So it is here to stay. And whether we like it or not, it is something that we need to understand for our companies or our businesses, or even for us as individuals. So I will just quickly go on and invite my speaker for today, Rukaya, to give us her opening remarks on this issue, and particularly on the topic that we're looking at today, ESG perspectives of the next generation. Welcome, Rukaya. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and it's an honor to have you as my moderator today. I look forward to the session. So to set the context, I think it's important that we understand, the challenges happening in the world today. And that's just to kind of lay the foundation before I go into, how the next generation generation view ESG and why it matters to them. At PwC, we have, the 5 mega trends. We have our ADAPT framework, where we believe there's certain 5 areas that would shape the world. And the first is asymmetry. We believe there's just so much income inequality. The middle class is shrinking. The pandemic was bad already. Then the war happened, the rippling effect, we're seeing hyperinflation, debt stress, and there's just so much going on. The next is disruptions. They're multifaceted, main ones being technology and climate change, of course. Another one is the age demographics, and it differs. Africa, we have a vibrant youth population. In the West, it's an aging population. Even China, you're having large nations such as China and all. Then there is polarization. You're seeing polarization in societies with people taking extremes. Of course, all this will bring us to breakdown of trust. There's just so much distrust between governments, even between the generations. I mean, typically there are 4 groups, right? The millennials don't understand the baby boomers. The baby boomers don't understand the Gen X, the Gen Z, and there comes frustrations. And when you look at it, millennials is estimated they will make 75% of the global force. And even with the consumer market, and if you bring it home to Africa, you'll see that the next generation actually form a large bulk, be it for purchasing power, for determining labor outcomes if they're especially in highly unionized environment and so on. So there is a lot happening, and the next thing I would like to jump on is a very interesting article by the Financial Times I stumbled on, where they surveyed young people, to understand the problems they're facing. And they interviewed over 1,700 people aged between 18 to 25 from around the world. And let me give you highlights of what they're saying. So during the pandemic, in more advanced countries, they felt they're cramped in their houses. There's the burden of loans, mismatched ideas. They complain, and this is include the older generations have never understood that while our pay has increased, it has wiped out by extortionist rise in property prices. So there is just this general anger of the younger generation with what they're inheriting, be it climate change, be it the tough economic environment. They complain about living with uncertainty. They complain about burnout. They complain about artificially high prices. Then specifically on ESG, they're asking who is accountable. And to read verbatim, they're saying sustainability are utmost key. And the older generation seem to miss this. It feels they have put us in a stage where there is no going back and there is no accountability whatsoever. This is someone from Brazil. There's just so much, happening. And I mean, that's why there's that call, to have a more circular, more inclusive, more regenerative and greener and more sustainable economy. And this is requiring businesses to reinvent themselves. Like I said earlier, they are going to be influential. They're determining investment patterns. They're determining product patterns. They don't care about ownership. It's more of convenience, and they're very purposeful. They want to invest and be part of solving the world's problem, which I've outlined. And that's the macro picture. And we are seeing adaptation become critical, especially for us here in Africa, because we're disproportionately impacted by climate change. Where the temperature is 1.5 degrees, we will be at 3%. And like I said, they make the bulk of the demographics, and they're very also particular about gender, because it's showing gender will be more impacted. And generally at COP27, the youth representatives, it was made up of 1,000 youths from across 140 countries. What they desire to see is more action for climate empowerment, adaptation, resilience, and accessibility to finance. Because if you look at social enterprises, they are the people that are quite active, from entering into businesses from waste to wealth, to even CSR projects such as the chess from some chess NGO, where they're helping people in lower income neighborhoods, and they just care, and it's really disrupting governments and business, and we're seeing they are the activists in this, trying to demand for more responsible business models, policies, and then of course accountability to this whole climate crisis.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that opening. I think that, you've really laid the basis for the conversation. I think that let me start from talking about an area which I know that is very dear to your heart. That is even climate change, and which is also based on the environmental pillar. Now, looking at the issues that we have currently across the world, and particularly in Nigeria, we can see most of these issues. So we're looking at issues around recycling. We have one or two companies or businesses that are into that in Nigeria, trying to, teach us how to recycle. We, as Nigerians, are not very used to recycling. But again, there's this effort to, bring it into our daily lives. We're looking at issues of water resources. We have a lot of water surrounding us, but we also have issues of clean water, which are also some of the key issues around the SDGs as well. And then we have issues around, environmental concerns, as you can see, particularly in places like Nigeria, in places like Lagos, for instance, where we have very serious flooding issues. Now, how do all of this, because one of the questions that, a young person that is in business, or whether it's a startup, whether it's entrepreneurship, will ask is, okay, so this is one of the things that is on the table. This is one of the things that investors are interested in. What does this mean for long-term returns for my business? Because remember, we're saying that ESG is looking at the non-financial risk issues that investors look at. So what would this mean from your perspective? What would this mean for, how does this translate into a long-term business advantage for me as a young business owner?
Yeah, very, very important question you put out there, and you raise a lot of what we call material areas, which
Absolutely.
are, those areas that are relevant, that you typically look at. Okay, let me start by saying, with sustainability, it's really about long-term value creation, where you're trying to create that value called shared value, that creates value for you as an enterprise or a business, while at the same time creating value for the society. And each time you're going to do a strategy, you're going to prepare reports, or as a business, you do something called materiality assessment, right? And that materiality assessment helps you scan through the horizon of issues. You've raised flood, you've raised waste recycling, You've raised water governance, which is a natural capital resource efficiency things. So you look at it, and another thing about sustainability is about juggling the balls. There are 4 key areas. So you have, and the one I like to use, the framework I like to use is the one by WEF, called the stakeholder capitalism, where it's about optimizing your performance on people, the people pillar, planet pillar, prosperity, and principles of governance. So the financial too is important for you to have a sustainable business. So, typically, you need to look at, your landscape. You need to look at the global risks, trends. You need to look at your industry. You need to look at regulations. You need to look at, and you need to engage your stakeholders. So once you do that, you now through engaging the stakeholders, you have that short list of your material areas, and you typically develop your strategy in the long term with a long-term horizon, because what you're trying to do, you're looking at it, if it's a strategy, you're looking at it from a risk and opportunity perspective. And we don't like seeing companies strive for, or businesses strive for compliance. It's about value creation. So you're looking at, okay, this area, so let's take this waste recycling. What are the risks to me as a business, and what are the opportunities for me that I can put, for me to protect my value and also create value, be it accessing new markets, new products, new customers, and all. Typically, even if you look at it, there's mostly, financial benefits from this. And you talk about non-financial, the thing is, it's gone beyond that. I'm telling you now, if we do ESG due diligence, investors are saying, look, don't come and just tell me this area is a risk for me. How does it affect my enterprise value? And that's why, the IFRS standards were developed, because one of it is investors, a desire to see the connection, how these non-financial areas translates into the financial, and it affects their financial performance and enterprise value, besides the need to have a wide view. Then another important thing you talk about is culture, be it with our water governance, how we manage water, I just think that's why the next big thing besides climate is nature-based investments. After COP27, there was the nature scope, and there was a pledge to preserve 1/3 of the world's nature, biodiversity, and all that. So natural capital, you have to look at it. You have to look at country level, how are you, translating it. That's why beyond carbon accounting, there's now nature accounting, from forest to your water bodies, how are you leveraging it for all year round farming, how are you ensuring responsible use of these, because they're public goods. So what I see in the future is there'll be a price on these things. I think very soon, and I'm telling you, as a business, if you don't even start now, what is happening with carbon is going to happen, where they're trying to hold people that polluted the earth responsible through this loss and damages. So the way countries will contribute, most likely America will contribute 40%. China started late. They didn't start emitting as early as some Western nations. So I see that happening, where no more water doesn't become a free resource. We're seeing carbon tax. There might be different forms of taxes. Then we're recycling. In fact, I can tell you, sometimes if I deliver, especially if I'm doing awareness trainings, I get questions like, how can you go and explain to people that are hungry to recycle? Whereas and actually, one of the briefing I got is, the youths in the Western countries takes ESG more seriously than youths in Africa, because it's about survival, and not everyone understands how they link. and how they interconnect. How, for example, the climate crisis is leading to loss of livelihoods, which is also affecting insecurity, which is affecting their ability to get jobs. They don't understand how interconnected it is. And
I think not understanding it is not deliberate. It is also because some of the issues that we are having to deal with on a daily basis are not issues that the Western world have to deal with on a daily basis. So if you're thinking about looking for cash right now, I don't think recycling will be one of the things on your mind. But just so that you also flow into it, I think that one of the issues that I think that we also want to look at is, so in all of this, why should I be interested in it? I think that, just piggyback on that last point that you made, how in the Western world, they take it more seriously. And back home in Africa here, when that's not one of the major issues, because we're also dealing with quite a lot of issues, whether they be socially related issues, whether it's political, whether it's environmental issues and all of that, and even public governance and even corporate governance issues. So why is this important? Why should I be interested in ESG as well as much as it relates to sustainability? Who am I trying to satisfy? I want to do good. I want to be a responsible business. I want to be a responsible entrepreneur. But again, also linking it to the fact where you say it is also important, not just are we looking at the non-financial risks that are involved, but because at the end of the day, materiality issues will link to your financial base at the end of the day. It's about how wonderful a business you are and how that translates to your finances as well. So why should I be interested in this? Who am I trying to satisfy? What value add does it bring to me? And again, I like to use this word that a lot of people like to ask, what's the business case, for ESG in my business? What's the business case? And when we talk about business case, we're talking about how much money is this bringing to the table? You know what I mean? Because if you're speaking, I speak to a lot of C-suites, and the first thing they're like, look, all this sustainability, whatever. I mean, what's the bottom line? Where is the money? Show me the money. So I want you to be able to, link at that. And I think someone made a comment here. It's a wrong assertion that Lagos is a flood-prone area. Be specific. I think that that's not very true. Not even with climate change. We've had areas like Ikorodu. We've had areas like even Ogudu, Yanokwaja areas that have experienced flooding. I mean, if you're following the news this last time, so flooding does not just come by because people are living next to the water. Flooding comes by a lot of other issues, which are some of the environmental issues that we're talking about. When the gutters are not clean, when the gutters are filled, when our living standards, when we're not recycling, so the plastics are getting into our waterways, you will experience flooding. So I think you also need to be able to read up on that. That is a very key environmental issues. It's not just areas are not prone to flooding because they are close to the seabed or to the waterways. In countries where a lot of environmental issues are not taken into consideration, you will experience flooding, even if they are flash flooding, but you will always experience flooding. So Rukaya, please, just to answer that.
Absolutely. Just to add on that, Lagos is one of the cities that are under the threat of going under water, the coastal areas from rising sea level as well. With water is either it's too little, too much, or too polluted. And like Ini mentioned, Lagos is flood prone, partly due to the governance around the infrastructure. But then there is rising sea level. In fact, I can't remember what year that CNN was simulating, how certain cities like New York, Lagos will go underwater, from the rising sea levels, from the iceberg melting, at the uptake this now. And to go to your question as a business, is you're doing it honestly for yourself. Because let me tell you, as a business, our CEO, our most recent CEO survey, the verdict is you invent yourself or die. Most CEOs believe if you continue business as usual, you're not going to survive the next 10 years. So what they're calling for is a balanced agenda, because things are so tough now. So how do you survive now while positioning for the future? So there is a strong case. So the data has shown companies built on purpose are the ones that live to last. You look at even the multinationals, including us, the audit firms. We've been in existence since the 1800s. We're purposeful. Our ethos is building trust in society and solving important problems. So, and even, young generations believe businesses exist to serve society. So if you are in business to address something or provide a service that society needs, by default, because that's your focus, as society is shifting, you are going to shift as well and keep reinventing yourselves. This thing is about future-proofing your business, but coming on a macro level, you would have cost savings. I'm telling you, once you adopt sustainability, resource efficiency, you move to solar, for example, to just even cut down your listing. If you decide to cut out travel, you decide to even change to bulbs with sensors, you record significant cost savings. And on some activities, you'll be amazed that it could be up to 100%. So there is cost savings. There is brand equity, right? Most companies, the valuation is based on intangible assets, and a lot of it is through the perceived, this thing of the company. So you do have a lot of brand equity. Social license to operate. You're creating value. There's a time, it's a big manufacturer in Kaduna, and we all know Kaduna is a hot security zone, but they've never been attacked. Their staff, I don't think they're having kidnapping or anything. And I was asking, how come? I said, because they practically they kind of own the company. They are the workers. It's a source of livelihood for them. So, there's that social license to operate, and the company is able to operate. Talent. I'm telling you, most talented young people, they want to work in a company that is ethical, that is not just purely thinking of profit. They want to be, like I said at the beginning, part of solving society. You would access new sources of finance, new products, let me tell you, climate finance, the pool is in trillions, even the green finance. And Africa is not doing well in accessing it, because we are not putting that ESG lens to how we're building our products, how we're preparing projects and all that. And even recently, from October, there's going to be a regulation for exporting goods to Europe. It's going to affect trade, this cross-border adjustment mechanism, where you have to report on the carbon footprint of what you're exporting to the Europe. There's some that you have to even pay that price on carbon, this thing. And there are looming regulations. I've mentioned this one. Nigeria had announced early adoption of the IFRS standards. All businesses, including the SMEs, report based on IFRS. I'm sure there will be a step down for IFRS. And then, generally investors care, providers of capital care, because they are looking at the carbon intensity, for example, of their loan book, and we're seeing growing impact investors. So you're seeing for the first time investors even threatening to exercise their voting right on boards, to this thing. And these are just to mention a few. I just think it's no more a choice. It's here to stay clearly, because when you look at the population will increase, these resources are finite. We're seeing the catastrophe. The IMF president, she said something at one of the recent was it the annual meeting or spring meeting? She said people can survive economic hardship, but they can't survive climate. You can't flooding. You can't survive it. You can't look at the earthquake. That's not in relation to climate change, but there was a governance issue with the buildings. So clearly, some engineers didn't follow, because it's known that it's an earthquake-prone area, and because some buildings are still standing, there is a way of mitigating, against some of these natural disasters as well. So I guess you want to comment.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's so critical, because when we talk about governance issues, I think that that's one of the things that should really concern us as well. Looking at the fact that agencies that are also supposed to regulate buildings, for instance, looking at the case of Turkey, and not doing that, and seeing the catastrophe, that the disaster that comes with, the gaps in this area. And I think that we have also seen that in so many ways, even in back here in Nigeria. One of the issues raised here by an attendee is that the question of where is the money is answered by the importance of ESG itself. This is about reinvesting in the greater good of everyone. We know that investment in ESG in the West drives fast interest turnaround for companies. As someone who has worked with companies to repurpose ESG into their core programming, I've seen profits increase. Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we're having this session, to also try and integrate it into the consciousness of as many businesses and business owners as it's possible. Because whether you like it or not, I think that in this part of the world, we're always slow at jumping on the train. So sometimes it's when the train is about leaving the station that we now grab on it. And it's the same thing we've seen in sustainability. It took a long while to be able to get C-suite executives, CEOs, board executives to understand the importance of entrenching sustainability into every single part of their business. It was more like something that was done externally, but you don't give what you don't have. It has to be internal before it's external. And then another person here is asking a question, which I'm going to flow into the next question that I am also going to ask you. And the question is, according to Reuters News, the EU has banned the use of fossil fuels by 2035. Is Africa a market known for everything recycled, ready for this change? How can this transition happen without significant currency, technology, value, and economic erosion? That's a question. And I think it's such an important question when you look at the fact that I was reading recently something around why African economies are struggling with issues of climate change and technology. And that's one of the things, is that we are like a dumping ground for what is not needed in the West. So whatever is not required, they dump it here, and we're happy to receive it, because again, like I said, we're always late to jumping in. So while they're changing their technology, we're jumping on the technology. So how do we navigate these trade-offs? You know what I mean? So the trade-offs around wanting to do the right thing, but at the same time being saddled. Do you understand what I mean? Being saddled with issues of diversification, so we're looking at, renewables. We're looking at organizations shifting their entire portfolio to renewable energy just because they want to do environmental sustainability. How is that favoring investments in that, sector? What is the trade-off for the impact on the economy? What is the trade-off on the impact on investors' portfolio? What is the trade-off on small businesses, young startups that are coming up? I think that, just share your thoughts around that.
Yeah. So as a sustainability practitioner, it makes me sad to see that we don't realize that this is actually a leapfrog opportunity for us. and we're at more advantage than the West, because we don't have, most of our industries are still new. They're just developing. So we don't have switching costs and switching barriers like them. Yet they are taking it more seriously. So now let me start with the politics of fossil fuel. Honestly, I'm not aware of that deadline, because that 2025, I'm not aware. Because when you look at it, Europe with the war in Ukraine, what they've even done is, before they classified gas, for example, as brown, now they are classifying it as green. You can see them powering back coal. So now and that's why I spoke about that juggling ball. You can't shift the burden. You're trying to solve an environmental problem. You create a social crisis. You can't. You have to craft, and that's why it requires scenario stress planning, stress testing, and all that. If not, you create policy is delicate. So what I do know is, even now, for example, there's that decade of gas, where gas will be a transition fuel. And, it's about reinventing the energy system such that, there is, affordable, sustainable, accessible, energy for all. And what I personally think in the end is going to be about an energy mix, an optimal energy mix that guarantees that security, because I can promise you there's no way Europe won't search for alternatives. They don't want to be dependent on people, because if you look at Britain, I remember seeing the energy minister, I can't remember exactly what his designation is called, saying power for Britain from Britain, right? So, and you have Africa pushing for climate justice, they're pushing for just transition, and we are the people that are so poor and require that energy, so, and we're resource endowed, so we do have this thing. And that's why you'll see, if you look at our energy transition plan, you'll see carbon sequestration, and that's why the government wants to start carbon trading. You'll see carbon capture technologies, and you'll see there's more move to gas before we move to electric, right? And with gas, it does have methane emissions, but at least you can capture it and turn it into blue hydrogen. That's a way with fossil fuel. I think the other aspect, and if you can remind me, there's another aspect apart from the fossil fuel.
The trade-offs. The trade-offs.
It's a dilemma, and the dilemma is long-term versus short-term survival. It's also, the trade-offs between those four areas, right? And that's why I think if you run through that materiality assessment, at least the areas. So and you can mitigate some of it. So I can be, and that's why oil and gas companies are the largest purchasers of carbon credits. So you can actually offset. Like I mentioned, for example, listen, but the thing is, we do not even have the capital to explore and produce domestically Africa, and there's just such a huge pool. But I think if you have your plans on how to mitigate and reduce these externalities, I think we can be able to use our natural resources to grow, our people, to develop our people, to improve standard of living. But then when you look at some of these technologies, we talk about renewable energy, companies trying to, I honestly think these mini grid solutions, off-grid decentralized power solutions, they're the quickest way to deploy power, electricity for all. be it if it's a gas decentralized grid to serve maybe the commercial. I just think, it even gives us a solution, given how messed up our distribution network is. All these off-grid decentralized solutions will actually help us. So then another thing is, you talk about technology. We do not invest in R&D. I don't know why we don't have self-belief. And it's not just climate. I remember we did an industrial plan for a state that has lots of learning institutions. And there was a handshake between the learning institution, even down to work-ready skills. So we need to have belief and make Wakanda come to life. Honestly, that Wakanda and do value addition. Why is it that our minerals are being exported to produce batteries? What's the big deal? Nothing is rocket science. So there are some, we can't continue how we go. There's some strategic things we need to change. We need to invest in R&D. We need to invest in our talent. We need to empower, create the enabling environment, for us to be able to create technologies. There are some that you see here and there. There's a group of very young people in Abuja. They're producing electric vehicles, including they developed a charge station from solar. So you do see, and this is where youths come in. And that's why, if you see, like I said, at COPE, they're calling for empowerment. They're calling for access to finance. So you even on social media, you see different innovations by people, young people, that you just know that if we can invest in R&D and empower our talent, we'll have our technology, because we don't have that access to technology. One, capacity and technology is something that would inhibit our ability to strike that, to actually lead as well on this and participate in these future value chains.
Thank you, Rukaya. So I mean, just piggyback on the last bit of thing that you said, and the use of technology, because I think that one of the questions that we have here is, how do we organize ourselves as an organization to deliver our ESG and sustainability strategy, including structural work and platforms? And yesterday I was having a conversation with I think someone saw the poster of this event and sent me a message saying there's a Nigerian-owned startup in the US that is using AI technology to drive ESG. And it came about, the whole idea started from the creation of local content initiatives within the oil and gas sector in Nigeria. Now they're US based, but they use technology to try to drive AI. And part of what they do is creating some level of using AI to be able to help you work out your ESG metrics for your investors, and measuring a few things, whether it's on climate change issues, asking questions around corporate governance performance, the strategy you're using in terms of addressing some of these issues, looking at even key criteria like your risk management systems, and then what are your metrics and targets that you've put in place in terms of that. So again, looking at it and saying, what role do you think that in the next couple of years that technology is going to play for ESG, and looking at it in the context of us as Nigerians, not even the larger Africa, because truth be told, I think that when we look at it in terms of the larger Africa, Nigeria may be wobbling in some place and also doing very well in some place when we look at technology. But the acquisition of technology is different from the usage of technology. I think that that's something that we always miss. So when you talk about this with a few people, they're like, oh, Nigeria is the startup capital of the world, and we have a lot of startups. That's fine. But in terms of how are we using even the technology that the startups are bringing up to be able to deliver ESG and sustainability strategy, for instance, then we see the gap. So in looking at it, what would you say that, so looking at this kind of initiative, for instance, I think they're called Locomex or something, yes, Locomex Group, where the use of AI, where do you see this in the next couple of years? And what should people be looking out for?
In fact, if you go to ChatGTP now and ask for materiality assessment for an industry, it would do it for you, very well, and being where I am, I'm seeing where AI is being used on ESG ratings. For example, there's Risk Insights that does the ESG ratings for listed markets in Africa, taking into consideration our local laws, the African peculiarities. They cover Joburg, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and I think they just launched or are about to launch Mauritius. There is a company that is using artificial intelligence to develop materiality assessments. The AI scans, the reports of peers, global peers, and they can even tell you regionally, each region, what's the material topics, the collected, so that brings independence. So is the ChatGPT one, I don't know what's the source of the data. I just think it's important to have, a source of data or on these things. So data and tech is very important, very, very important for ESG. Even to do carbon trading and all these, you need to even have data. I can promise you, Nigeria, I'm just imagining how Nigerian businesses that export to Europe will suffer because we don't even collect the data. So it even starts from the data, then the tech, and from beyond the technologies that will help tackle some of these climate issues or sustainability issues, the tech that companies need to implement after they do their strategy. All these OEMs, SAP, Salesforce, they all are now having sustainability modules. But what we are seeing for large corporates, global entities, sometimes they even have to deploy all the technologies to be able to satisfy, their technology needs. So technology data will play a critical role even in sustainability practices. You have use of pesticides that is such an issue with farming. You can use drones. You can send sensors and lighting. They can all help with this. And so it's even the only way, to be honest. I don't even see how the way you need to embrace ESG, you need to embrace you need data. So for us in PwC, we say human-led and tech-empowered or enabled, right? So data is critical, and I also, would love to see more startups. We're seeing climate unicorns springing up, and I would love to see more Africans, especially with our resources, value addition. This is what will create jobs. Yes, beyond the tech data, but even with the kind of high-tech manufacturing, when we did that industrial plan I was talking about, we knew that circular economy and high-tech manufacturing had to be captured. Down to even where you're looking, okay, if you convert waste to wealth in agric, this is the gross value add to GDP. And we knew that even UNIDO, the way they do the industrial index, is high-tech manufacturing. Tech is the way forward. And it just plays such a critical role.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so someone put a question here. You spoke about offsets. Investing in solar energy does not automatically translate to green energy, as the minerals and metals required for the panels is not finite and impacts negatively on resource efficiency. Yeah, are the
It's
financial, sorry?
I'm so sorry, someone knocked on my door. Apologies. I thought I muted. Apparently, I switched off
No
the camera.
problem. No problem. Okay. So, but can you hear the question?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Apologies for that. Someone was at my door knocking. They would
No
have
problem.
disrupted the session. Yeah.
So the question is about, you spoke about offsets. Investing in solar energy does not automatically translate to green energy. So I think the question is, are the financial institutions in Nigeria willing and patient enough to invest in research on alternative energy sources that are not as brown as this? If so, can we have some examples? I don't know if you have any experience around working with financial institutions in this regard. But of course, we all know, I mean, working in this field, that investing in research is not something that is very, that we push that to the not-for-profit organizations to be able to do that in terms of research for issues around sustainability and ESG. But that is the question. But let me also include that to say how and how should organizations navigate the ever-changing landscape of ESG and sustainability? Because when you look at it every single day, we have newer issues that are being involved. Even this issue of renewables is a constant, the bars, the boundaries, the requirements are constantly, shifting and all of that. And particularly for us in Africa as well, that are just coming into the core of renewables. And I think that that's also something very critical. Then link that as well to another question here that someone says, provide more clarity on carbon credits, especially within the Nigerian space. If you have experience with that, who is driving the market here? What type of projects are being targeted as beneficiaries of this credit? And how can we assess it if they're available?
Yeah. So I'll start with the last, which is the one on carbon credit. We are at early stages, although there is voluntary trading on voluntary markets, because there are two types of markets: the jurisdictional market and the voluntary market. So for us in Nigeria, the Climate Change Act lays the foundation, because typically, if you look at South Africa, for example, there is a carbon budget for the country. It gets cascaded to sectors, and corporates have actually a carbon budget. So the way you run your business, you can't exceed this amount of carbon emissions. If you exceed, you pay carbon tax. If you reduce, you pay incentives. If you offset by buying carbon credit, it still helps reduce your tax, because they're looking at how have you, on a net basis, stayed within that envelope budget you're given. So Africa, we don't have the markets, and that's why at COP27, the Africa Carbon Market Initiative, chaired by our Vice President, was introduced. And in Nigeria, what I do understand is all the stakeholders that when they unanimously agree that we need to establish the emissions trading scheme. So the responsible agency that would drive this will be the National Council on Climate Change. Of course, there will be many other stakeholders, but right now, a lot of things are in silo, and the hope is they would be the people to centralize governance, around these strategic things that require, multi-stakeholder. But before you can even do carbon credits, the way you shape your project, because there are standards, because there will be verification, kind of like an assurance process to ensure that those projects meet the standards. So the ones that are hot, clean cooking, I don't know if you know, a bulk of our emissions energy is from cooking. So clean cooking, beyond that, because of the gender impact social impact because of improved health outcomes, and it helps address deforestation. So I understand the outlook, and this thing is this because it's expected that the price will increase for carbon credits. So clean cooking, reforestation projects, you even have with sustainable agriculture, mostly activities that help you avoid, reduce, or absorb carbon, would typically this thing. There is article is it 6? There's an article by the UN that is under review that would help address these issues, and you're starting to see the quest for global baseline, which will help with even global trading of carbon. So there is, and what we've seen recently is the joint venture between our investment authority with Vitol. They have a pool of they have a pool of money where they're trying to invest in projects, that can attract the carbon credit. So I don't know what the plan is for Nigeria, whether there will be a jurisdictional market, or if it's to put the regulations that will help, companies trade favorably and easily on those voluntary markets. Then you talk about financial institutions and investing in R&D, or the startups. The most recent experience I have with someone in a bank, they said they overbloat their valuation startups. Every sector has its this thing, but I honestly, my take is it's more of a government intervention because if you look at it, it's to create the enabling environment, the incentives. There is a lot of private pool of capital to unlock, and I believe even in Nigeria we do have this venture capitalist this thing, and I'm sure the financial institutions might find pockets of where they can invest in companies that have viable plans to do R&D that would translate into a viable solution, that will not turn out to be a non-performing venture for them for the loan. Is there anything else that I haven't answered? I've addressed the carbon markets.
Yeah, I think that you focused on most of it, and I think most of it also, because we still have a few other questions, but most of it, will flow into it. And I think that takes us back to one of the issues that I think the prior issue that was raised around if the financial institutions are open, to funding, so issues around carbon credits, issues around, research for alternative energy, aside from solar and all of that. And my question even begins to this person will be: are they even funding solar renewables at this point in time? I don't think so, and that's why the cost is still very high in this part of our market, in this part of the world. The cost of solar energy, the cost of even the basic renewable is still extremely high. And even for businesses who also want to go back to clean energy, it is something that they're still even having to struggle with. So I think that is an issue that we clearly understand. So the next issue here, the next conversation here is around, okay.
Can I just add a bit to that? Because that's very important to our energy transition journey in Nigeria, because for energy is about displacement of diesel powered generators, because they are a key source of emissions.
Absolutely.
And solar and financing solar, like you rightly mentioned, is what I have seen is a private sector. So there is a fund. I know of a clean energy fund that InfraCredit is trying to listen, and UK government, the UK NIFE or something, they're trying to guarantee because it's just high risk. So it's about risk sharing, and you have institutions that would guarantee the loan, and that makes the banks, more open, or it helps them because, like I said at the beginning, that prosperity pillar, you die if you don't consider that. So there are some interventions we are seeing that is helping de-risk some of the projects that for the banks to consider. So I do expect a lot more funding that will be channeled into this, by virtue of, if you look at our decarbonization plan as a country, and the interventions and the projects that have been mapped out, and it's definitely a market approach and PPP led. So but I do know Access Bank is quite active with climate finance, and they're a preferred hub, because the green bonds they've done has helped them build the governance systems from within. Like you mentioned earlier, it's about integration. You have the governance mechanisms, and this thing. So there are some banks, I don't know if particularly on solar, but there are financing opportunities and there are solutions. Do you know there's lighting as a service for solar, where they can come and install your panel and you pay over time? We did a study, recently did a study on why diesel power generators have been pervasive over solar, that we found out. In fact, there's a big multinational that has a net zero commitment that has that lighting as a service as part of its energy mix. So it just requires a lot of solutions. There are many constraints to solar, including buildings, so a lot will have to change down to building permits, the way we approve the design, to incentives. Right now you see waiver on the panels, you don't see. So it's a whole gamut of reforms that need to happen across the value chain. They're encouraging local manufacturing. I think those are all the initiatives identified. Then, having intervention funds to enable people take up, because what came out of that study is the high capital outlay. And most times, in fact, we did survey, and for the corporate segment, the feedback we got is every year it's about continuing maintenance OPEX versus that huge CAPEX to change. And yes, still, if you look at the business case over a 10-year horizon, you listen. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that that identifies even the issue around one of the questions here: where are we on financing the ESG landscape, and the issues around the trade-off between returns and impact. I think that clearly answers it. There are organizations that are beginning. I know about what InfraCredit is trying to do. So looking at that and trying to see how do we also engage in that regard. There's a comment here around ESG being a global drive, and then this is the time for businesses to develop smart governance structure to capitalize on it. And that takes me to the next question around how would you say that boards of organizations need to evolve, understand and be able to deliver the ESG and sustainability strategy of the businesses? Because one of the things that we have not understood is, so many times when people talk about ESG, over the years, the environmental part has always been, flagged as the most important factor or the most important element of ESG. But then we've seen as time goes on that governance is actually the most important. Naturally, because if you don't have governance that understands the issue, is able to move the debate into mainstream conversation, is able to educate clients and customers around how your business sees the issues. It's also able to sell this to investors. It's not the external that is going to, it's not the environment that is going to sell the business, but the governance around the business itself, the performance of the ESG funds within that business, how it's been governed, how it's been managed. I think that, you know, these are some of the issues. So how do you think that the boards of organizations, the C-suite executives, the management level of organizations need to understand and evolve? And so that's one part. So let me link the second question around, someone said, how do we fill the knowledge gap, you know, through trainings, you know, because we have many individuals and organizations who are not well enlightened or educated. And I think in answering that, so you can also add that that's why we're doing this session. That's why NBCC is doing this. The awareness is still very low. The awareness is still being seen as it's only for businesses. It's only for people who have certain kinds of interests that should be interested in ESG. But as we've broken it down, you can see that the maintenance of our roads it's important to every one of us, because when it rains and it floods and you don't know where the gutters are because the gutters are filled and overflowing, your car is going to bump into that gutter. And so you are going to be involved in one way or the other. So sometimes, you know, breaking this down to the minutest sometimes might require some of the things. Well, hey, how do we ensure that boards, individuals, organizations, people on the street, yes, we're talking to the next generation now, but how can this be an everyday issue? How do we deliver these conversations in ways that boards of organizations, C-suite executives can begin to integrate it in their everyday affair?
Okay. I mean, you reached to the very important part, because indeed it's the macro, collective macro activities at business level, corporate level, that adds up, you know, for a country. And, you know, for us in Nigeria, that we even have a large informal sector. It goes even beyond the formal corporates to those, and how you get them to join this thing for us to truly achieve that transformation. So coming to governance and the boards, everything starts with tone at the top. And if an organization has very good corporate governance best practice, because the boards are meant to be trained continuously in line with how things are evolving. So the company itself would have picked that the board needs to be trained on ESG. I know there's some organizations, mostly banks, they even include it in their induction. I normally get called by our governance team to come and take a session for induction and all that. So what's the board role with ESG? We have a huge part to play, besides the enabling the culture by setting the tone at the top. They need to oversee that the organization prepares the right blueprint, the right ESG strategy and blueprint that speaks to the relevant and material matters for that organization. They need to ensure that it's implemented, you know, and achieving the results, because a good ESG strategy would not only highlight those areas, it will identify what to do, who will do it, and have KPIs, and it gets integrated. The ESG shouldn't be in silo. The span of control, the span of involvement of different departments for ESG is huge, you know. So they need to ensure, you know, that their governance, the implementation, this thing, they need to oversee that execution. They need to also ensure the communication is done transparently with data integrity and investor-grade data. They need to ensure the risk management, you know, also takes those ESG into consideration. Because if you look at the IFRS standards for the S1, the for sustainability standards 1, it requires companies to disclose the risks and opportunities, the ESG risks and opportunities, the governance, the risk management, and the metrics they're using on themselves. And of course, that concept of materiality comes up and all that. So it's the boards play a critical role. And some would say, you know, to enable the execution, it also includes executive linked pay. Then you also have the boards to have subcommittees. So when they have the portfolio of the areas, so how and things to do, you know, to implement that blueprint, you're ideally meant to, or the subcommittees should also oversee the performance of those areas. So if there's a HR and remuneration committee, they should have oversight to how the company is performing on diversity, for example, women, gender, you know, and the learning and development of employees, you know, and all those things. Audit committee needs to make sure, you know, the data is being tracked and, you know, with quality and like I said, it's investor grade and all that. So you talk about knowledge gap. Honestly, that's why I agree to speak as much as I can, because I do know, you know, that knowledge gap is there, and I can see many organizations doing that. Even professional bodies of Nigeria are all putting ESG on their conference agenda to address this knowledge gap. I know even IFRS, the FRCN, the financial, they plan on addressing this knowledge gap, helping build capacity for this adoption of the standards. But the thing is, the way an organization should upskill on technology, they should upskill on ESG. And for us, that's why we're trying to develop like an academy with e-learning modules that just even essentials, the basics of ESG, the basics of climate, such that an organization can roll it out. But it needs to, especially if organization embark on the journey of developing and executing the strategy, it needs to be backed by this thing. And I didn't touch the role of executives. They develop the blueprint, they implement, then the middle managers. So it should get cascaded. If you're a bank, your CRO would have theirs, the investments will have theirs, operations will have theirs, HR will have theirs, facility managers will have theirs. I can tell you this ESG, even your travel agents, if you're renting on a building, I'm telling you, that facility manager on that building, when the requirement to calculate your carbon footprint starts, you would have to even help them upskill and probably even help them establish the systems. And I honestly think the earlier the better, because it's not easy getting those data. You know, the emissions factor for a business class is different from economy. It's that little nitty gritty, your water consumption, the different sources of your energy in your office, how much of diesel, how much of national grid. That's the detail of data you need to be able to capture to even if now Nigeria has the carbon budget, because it's provided for in the Climate Change Act, you know, for you to know if you're sticking within that carbon budget. So
Thank you, Rukaya. Thank you. I think that we've really touched on almost everything. I will just run through just the remaining questions. I think we have very short time. We left as well. So let's see. How can we, I think we've touched on this as well, because I think that, you know, when we talk about, you know, the ability to, the knowledge gap as well, it's part of it. The question is, how can we introduce ESG into our education system? I think that That is already one of the key issues because it's part of the pillars of the SDGs. Absolutely. I think that part of that is around having conversations around it and incorporating it in almost everything, in understanding climate change, understanding environmental concerns, are all part of the education bit of it. Another question is, what are the effects of ESG in real estate and construction? I don't know if you have around that, but I think that, looking at, when we look at construction, we're also looking at, the ability to track and measure ESG performance. But again, the issue of data in the construction and real estate industry is also very important. And then, issues around carbon reduction, energy efficiency, and then I think particularly is also around healthy buildings. You know what I mean? Which is also one of the conversations we have around what happened in Turkey. Who is looking at the health of the buildings? Who is ensuring that the right things are done? Are the agencies actually doing what they're supposed to do? I think that is a critical issue, particularly in a country like Nigeria, where people try to cut corners. We've seen the effect of a lack of ESG performance. If we look at the last building collapse in Ikoyi, for instance, and the concerns that surrounded all of that, the issues around the number of floors, the issues around the approvals and all of that, I think that fits into it. But again, you can also share your thoughts on that. Another question here is around, again, the impacts associated with construction and manufacturing, and then how that links to carbon emissions as well. Another question is, I think this is for NBCC. What funding opportunities can NBCC help with for startups in the ESG space? NBCC, you have work. I think that Mr. Ahmed will answer that later. But I mean, just looking at it around, the real estate and the construction, I think that there's a lot that can be said around that. I think that that's one of the conversations that I have with clients who don't think that these issues can be, and then when we now begin to talk about the requirements of your investors in areas like, even on, some of them don't even think that on their construction, or, that issues around diversity, for instance, having issues around, diversity, equality, and inclusion training for their staff and for their board. This thing seems so far away, issues around even diversity around gender on the board. So you have a lot of real estate and construction firms that have no woman on their board whatsoever. It's as if women don't understand building or women don't understand real estate. I don't understand it. So I would like you to just very briefly touch on the areas.
Yeah. So for real estate, for me, I'm thinking, from design, the way buildings are designed now. I mean, I don't have any light switched on now in my sitting room because I have a large sliding door that is glass. So the way we design to position for, and I go into buildings, offices, and we're using light in the daytime, whereas we are so abundant with solar light during the day and work hours. Imagine a smart design, what it will do. Down to, heating, cooling. But by the way, it's one of the key buildings, is one of the top, the prioritized 5 sectors in our energy transition plan. And for construction is about, and there are standards, BREEAM, lead, that help from the materials you use to how you ensure, the house is smart, and energy efficient, resource efficient. And I can tell you, even with appliances, and, to speak to your gender inclusion and diversity, beyond women, why are young people not on boards? I just don't get it. These are the block with the highest purchasing power. And you know what this, you get ideas with product development. A house A real estate design that will have a woman maybe would make the house maybe the kitchen design would even be, I'm not saying only women should be in the kitchen, but women are they think practically and functionally. Like me, I'm working on my house, and everything I'm buying, I'm looking at energy efficiency. Even my dishwasher, I went for not so popular brand because it has half load wash, because I know I'll use less water. AC, I'm looking at with inverter and all that. So for construction, it's about alternate materials. In fact, when this earthquake happened, someone posted something in, we need to move away from cement. Concrete is heavy. This thing that started, even looking at it from Egyptian civilization, that apparently they invented cement, to say if there are lighter building materials used in those. So these are the manufacturing. I think it's more of energy and of course emissions, right? So in converting the heating process to energy, some you see maybe there's a rice mill that might convert the husk to this. There are different innovations to decarbonize that we are seeing.
Okay,
Have
great.
I answered everything?
Yes, I think that's taking care of it. Okay, so there's a question here. So what is your advice for individuals that are interested in a career in sustainability? That'll be one. Another question here is I think again, the energy transition. With regard to energy transition and the calls for moving from fossil fuel vehicles to electric vehicles, is there any assessment of resource available for lithium for batteries to power these electric vehicles? I don't know. I mean, Rukaya, you might need to talk about that, because we have not, when we talk about, this fossil fuel transition, and again, like I said, we are always jumping on the train when the train is about leaving the station. So we are unable to even power our vehicles with fossil fuel, as it were. We've been having an energy crisis in Nigeria, at least in Lagos, for quite a while, off and on. Abuja went on for a while, got off it came to Lagos. We're still crunching in Lagos trying to get fuel. And then the transition to electric vehicles, where the charging points, you're talking about lithium batteries, the cost of lithium batteries for even powering solar again. So I think that, again, these are some of the issues that are raised when we talk about, moving from a linear economy to a circular economy. That how prepared are we as a people, as an economy, as a government, to even take on some of this? I think that these are critical conversations that we need to be true to ourselves.
So we do have it covered, because transport is one of the priority sectors in our energy transition plan, and the transition pathway is to move from fossil fuel to CNG, which is what Egypt uses, then to EV. And I mean, we're talking about 2050. But if you ask me, let me tell you what is happening in the automotive value chain. Most automobile manufacturers have a target to stop manufacturing combustible engines by 2040. So they've even moved faster than this, and it's about value chain. That's why when I see people talking, we have our fossil fuel. Do you manufacture cars? Do you manufacture the spare parts? A car, the spare parts may come from 50 different countries. It's a whole system, an ecosystem and value chain. So we can't afford not to move. That's the honest truth. And to be honest, with EV, you don't service your car. You do nothing, and it's so silent. Electric vehicles. So it's easy to maintain, no zero maintenance. All you do is change your battery from time to time. not unlike this thing. So with the CNG, I know it's in the transition plan to try and convert. That's the first and easiest thing. Convert the fueling component of the car such that it's like made from gas. Then moving to EV. Like I said, we are seeing people innovating to develop electric cars, and I know that's not the one I know here in Abuja is not the only one I've heard of. So this is where the financial institutions can come in with the R&D because it's viable. EV is here to stay. Honestly, the future is electric. There's this IRENA, they have this Global Energy Outlook report or something. They have a report, and the future is electric. But the thing is, we don't exist in isolation. And that's why we have to, at all point in time, think of a global approach because we plug into a wider world. It's a global world, and it's value chain. And if you look at, and I think this is why Africa probably were not with our poverty and development. We need to, if you look at Bangladesh, you look at China, they keyed into global value chains. China keyed in such that they became the manufacturing hub of the world. So what value chain have we identified to key in? Build skills. And just look at China. They're leading with solar manufacturing. They're still powering their coal, but they are leading with that. And that's why I said it has to be a balanced agenda, where you're trying to cater for now, because we do need mass transport. We need people to, transport is critical. I mean, the knock on my door was by my maid that is meant to go for internship. By looking at the frustration in her face, she couldn't get cash. She had to come back.
Wow.
So we have to look at that fossil fuel short-term CNG as transition, and the future is EV. And is in that EV, how do we leapfrog to that? Because we can't afford to stay on fossil fuel by that 2040, except if we become a dumping ground for those cars again, and we don't produce spare parts, except if there will be a plant to start producing the spare parts.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think the last two questions, I don't know if we still have some more questions. We still have a few minutes to go. It says, do we have a standard calculating method to determine emission activities at different scopes of organization activities? I know about the ghgprotocols.com where the different scopes can, but I think that maybe perhaps you have a better idea around that.
Yeah.
And then another question is, I believe that the social sector of ESG, such as employee work conditions, is really important in determining how an organization functions. I hear a lot about the E and G, but not about the social. I think that maybe you came in late, but I think that we've also been able to identify that, I mean, the social issues are very critical at this point. There's no way that, they're key material issues, because if you look at the real estate sector, for instance, the social issues would be, how are you identifying issues that are critical or important or material or impact your external stakeholders, and your external stakeholders and your internal stakeholders. So your internal stakeholders will be your human resource, your staff within the organization, your suppliers, and things like that. But I think that Rukaya will also take that and add to that. One other question is, for a young person who wants to start a career in sustainability, and I think that links to the first question, what would be your advice to someone who's starting a career in sustainability? Where do you start from? Where do you start from?
Okay. So let me start with the first one, which is on the emissions factor. You rightly mentioned most people use greenhouse gas protocols to calculate the carbon footprint, which is what the IFRS standards do have adopted and what we've seen so far. But there is this science-based target initiative that beyond the measurement, it guides to down to the reduction. And, I also use greenhouse gas protocols. So that is just something that categorizes. So there are different types of emissions, scope 1 and 2, that is more directly linked to the company. Then scope 3, which is your value chain. And you have people like BlackRock, for example, saying, why should I be the police of my suppliers? It should be regulations. And the interview I watched of the CEO, he was saying that he said it at COP26 and people were upset with him. So with emissions, you're expected to reduce and use your sphere of influence to reduce. Like PwC, we've started that journey. We've pledged to be net zero by 2030, and I'm responsible for the project for West Market. So I know very much, the down to the modalities. So there is still more to do to ensure we have a standardized approach. Nigeria doesn't have an emissions factor table yet. So it's the scope 1 and 2. The greenhouse gas protocols tell you how to categorize those activities for whether it's business travel, your energy consumption, your the diesel you've powered, your car fleets, all those your emissions generating activities. But it doesn't tell you what it will be converted to, what units should you use. That conversion factor is what is called the emissions factor. We don't have it yet in Nigeria, but I'm sure it's one of the things that the National Council of Climate Change is going to do, such that we have one way. So if I'm a company, I use 1,000 liters, I want to convert the emissions, that 1,000 liters of burnt in my car fleet. Then next company is also using that, and there's comparability. And even for carbon trading, this thing, it's imperative. So with the question on social, funny enough, if we do materiality assessment for companies, most of the material issues are on social.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at some point, I can't help but wonder, okay, I feel so bad, or are they still just thinking of themselves and they still don't get that this is about shared value creation? But I can tell you, for Africa, people get touchy about it, but carbon emissions is not material. We are very low emitting, but what's important for us is adaptation, because we'll be disproportionately hit, by the impact. We didn't emit tragedy. It's in economics, it's called tragedy of the commons. And with sustainability, you look inward out and outward in. So on social, your inward thing is your employee, for example, your outward is host community. On environment, your inward is health and safety, but your outward is emissions, your waste management. If your food and beverage, your end producer responsibility, that grave of your waste, how can it be cradle to cradle, which is the recycling in is talking about, and even for economic, your inward is your normal financial performance, including your stakeholders. Your shareholders are still part of your stakeholders. Stakeholder capitalism just says, look beyond looking at your shareholders, you're looking at wider stakeholders. But your outward for that is your tax contribution, the kind of household income you're creating, even through your value chain activities and all those things. Then the final question on career. What can I say? I would tell you, for me, exploring early. Since when I was in school, I used to go on internship. For your career, you need to know your destination. The mistake I see people, and it's okay if you don't know and you're still exploring, but make sure whatever choice you make exposes you to the possibilities. That's when you'll identify what I refer to as your blue flame. It's in a book, actually, not me. I read it in a book, where your talent meets your passion. But you need to explore, and you need to have self-belief, because I know of someone that is a Nigerian American. After her NYSC, we went to the LSE together. She came back, served at the CBN. This lady, I watched her get a job. She was list of all the possible organizations she wanted to work. She already has a very compelling CV, you know, and she ended up getting, from just that, going to this and dropping her CVs, she ended up getting even a dollar-paying job then. Just know what your end destination, what you want to get out of your career, and that will guide your choices such that you're making choices for the skills you'll develop and a sustainable career. Because work is now, because things are fast, the pace of life now because of technology. So if you don't love what you do, you get burnt out easily.
Yeah.
You have to be passionate, honestly, to do well sustainably, and you know, this thing, you should be happy, because you also have to think of your health and well-being, your mental health and all that. So you should love what you do. So
Excellent. Thank you so much. Someone just asked a question and I want to scream. Google is your friend. Is CSR the same as ESG? Please go and read. We've gone past this.
Chat GPT, there's chat GPT.
Chat GPT.
You'll be
Oh,
like
please.
me or Ini are answering you because you know, unfortunately yesterday I tried to put it for my dad, but they have exceeded capacity. You have to go on a waiting list. So first mover advantage, early adoption, whoever didn't sign on, too bad, you have to go on the waiting list.
I know. Chat GPT will help you, and then of course Google is your friend. There's so much resources out there. CSR, it's not the same. There are certain agreements, or what we like, or certain inclusions that will help you. If you understand CSR, then you move on to understand sustainability as a whole and as a concept. Then you'll be able to understand ESG, because somehow it is also about ensuring that we're doing the right thing, both for ourselves as organizations and as well as our society and the society that we live in. So we're not going to take that question. Please, yes, please.
Can I just, I think it's important to mention the evolution. If you see an organization taking CSR as ESG, you already know that they're at a very low maturity ESG state, because so it's just voluntary, this charity, just corporate social responsibility activities you do to just show, it buys you that license to operate. So what we've seen is companies moved from CSR to philanthropy. So you see this foundation, that foundation, all the organizations, you know, about what happened then is they were pledging a percentage of their profits to that foundation, and they were doing the CSR and all these activities they think will benefit the society. But ESG, the thrust is build it into your business model. Don't say you're running business just thinking of shareholders, then you take something out and go giving it out. Instead, the way you develop the business, you're also thinking of societal value. So that's why you see people in manufacturing, they do outgrower scheme, right? Because it's a win-win. So they have off-taking, they have more control to their supply chain, and those farmers have better outcomes, better income. You know, the risk is this in loss of harvest, because they already have an off-taker. And most of those companies, you see, they even invest in giving them seeds, the inputs they need. They train them the capacity building and all that.
Thank you. I hope that answers that question. And then, as I said, please do some more reading. It helps. There's so much information, so much resources out there that can also help, because sometimes also being able to read up on this also helps you to internalize it and then use it as it works for you, you know, individually or in your own individual business. So we have 2 more questions, and I think we just have a minute to be able to round up on this. The person says we need a mindset shift in Nigeria to view the economics before the politics. This will align our vision as a country. What do you think? I'm not very sure I understand that, but I'm sure you can if you do. And then the last question here is, what are some of the ESG standards necessitated by the pandemic? I don't know, you can answer that, because I think that we already have existing standard ESG standards and frameworks, such as the GRI standards. We have the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which is the TCFD. And then we have the SASB standards as well, which are the three significant ESG standards and frameworks that are used. But perhaps there are others. And then he said necessitated by the pandemic.
Yeah. Okay, I think so. The first question with regards to behavioral change, I'm a big believer of behavioral economics and behavioral science. And many of the breakthrough policies, so open defecation, for example, it's a big issue.
Yeah.
It requires, why? In front of me, there's a day I was driving behind a car, they threw a bottle, not nylon bag. How do you, so a lot of these things, ESG interventions and even the policy for tax morale, for example, they are all behavioral things, and there's behavioral economics and science that helps. In terms of putting economics above politics, I think they go hand in hand. You have to look at the political economy perspective if you want things to be successful. And, we just need to make sure whoever we elect in politics are people that are tough and courageous, are bold enough to come and say no to the politics, where the economics would be hampered so much. But it's just sad. I see in Nigeria, we kind of vilify some of those people taking that bold step, such that you're wondering if it's worth. I mean, we need to encourage, once we see a politician coming out to stand up in favor of economics, I think we should stop vilifying some of them. I remember when I was reading something on one of the candidates that he's stingy and this thing, someone that is refusing to use public purse to buy an extravagant thing. When I saw this thing, I was like, well, the person writing the story is the person showing, is a silly person I admire. And you'll see cases where people are trying to fight for the economics against, and Nigerians will still be attacking the person. So those one is just a governance issue, honestly, and this thing. So I think you've answered the question around the pandemic. I think what the pandemic has done is reveal the inequalities, a lot of the issues, and what it's done is accelerate the quest to have a more greener and more inclusive economy and also businesses. Standard-wise, I think those standards have all been there, but it's accelerating developing the standards. I'm sure with running offices and health and safety would change and all those, and reinventing, but in terms of policy specific, it's just accelerating because they are there. Many people have been saying, look, you're looking at GDP too much. As businesses, you're looking at financials too much. So that's my answer.
Thank you. I think there's no doubt that if we don't look at the economy, I mean, I think that it's a good thing, because the conversations are now shifting, even in this political season. Whether people like to talk about it or not, the conversations have already shifted in terms of what is the right way to go. We can't keep having to use public funds when the economy itself is dying. And all the things have, trickling effects on issues around the environment, issues around the social governance, issues around governance itself, whether they be, private, corporate governance, or even the public governance, as it were. So thank you so much, Rukaya. I think that we've done great justice to breaking this down, going into different aspects of it. We've looked at technology, we've looked at, the real estate and construction, we've looked at governance issues, we've looked at standards, we've totally encapsulated all the issues that can come around. We've looked at carbon emissions. We've looked at transition of energy transitions. We've looked at issues of finance, financing this whole thing. We've looked at, environmental issues around exactly what it is that we're going through right now. We look at how organizations can better be educated and trained, and how boards play a very important role in ensuring that these issues are critical. We've looked at the fact that corporate governance issues will consistently be front and center when it comes to crystallizing ESG, whether in norms, whether in practices. We've seen the impact of ESG and the importance of it. We've seen, there are statistics that show that with the COVID-19 pandemic, there was an increase for the ESG issues, whether it was ESG investing or the harmonization of sustainability reporting issues, particularly around, core ESG issues, particularly social, because the pandemic itself, focused on the social aspects of the ESG, looking at the health issues, looking at how businesses were going to survive, looking at business continuity for a lot of organizations, because whether we like it or not, as I always say, no matter how fantastic your environmental, social, and risk management system was, nobody prepared for COVID-19 and the shutdown that took place for more than 4 months. None of us in this era have been through a pandemic before. It happened in the 18th century. And so what that did was a stronger call for harmonization of the ESG and integration of ESG into business continuity issues and risk management systems. So we've looked at all of that, and I think that we've had a very fantastic conversation. There are a few people here saying, are there certifications that support ESG awareness and implementation? Absolutely. There are certifications for that. There are quite a number, whether so many, there are different ones, whether it's even in Global Association of Risk Professionals. There are those that come from even the ACCA, bit of it. There's the European Federation of Financial Analysts, where you have your certified ESG analyst. There's the Sustainability and Climate Risk Certification. There's the one from SASB, which is the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, where you have the Fundamentals of Sustainability Accounting certification. There's a certificate in ESG investing that is issued also by the CFA Institute. There's so many. Again, like I said, you can always, look up these things and try to find them up yourself. Another person is saying, I would like to ask, the organization is open to partnership on establishing capacity building for young business professionals across the 36 states on ESG and all of that. So Rukaya, is PwC open to that? Capacity building for young business professionals. And I think that this is something that NBCC can also take on board. What can we do better? Someone is also asking, particularly for the construction sector, is it possible to engage further? Maybe the NBCC group on real estate and construction can also take up having sessions on ESG integration, because truly I agree with you, a lot of ESG processes are often skipped in construction processes, particularly in a country like Nigeria. So NBCC, you have it cut out for you. How can we engage younger professionals and create sessions to better integrate and better train on this? And then of course, how do we engage the real estate and construction group on NBCC to be able to ensure that their members are constantly being engaged on issues of ESG, particularly when it concerns the sector and the industry that they play in. So thank you so much. I want to use this opportunity to thank our speaker for today, Rukaya. Thank you for the insights that you've shared. Thank you for your time. Thank you for bringing on board your knowledge and your experience. We appreciate it. We say thank you so much for accepting to do this. And I hope that when we call you, as you have said, that you always like to do this, that you'll be willing
the best of my ability.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all our participants. Thank you for your questions. I'm not doing the vote of thanks. I'm just, trying to appreciate my speaker. I would like to hand over to Mr. Segun Akintemi for the formal vote of thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And I must say that I've been well informed, well exposed. Before now, you'll be shocked that I am not such an expert when it comes to ESG, but I think I've learned so much. And very clearly, my own roundup word would be the fact that we need a lot more enlightenment, we need a lot of education, we need a lot more exposure. And I see it as more attitudinal than anything else. And I'm sure with this enlightenment, NBCC will take on a lot more roles in pushing this across all sectors of the economy. So on behalf of the Chamber, I would like to say a big thank you to Rukaya Rufai for her time and, of course, the information she's been able to pass on. I'd like to thank our moderator, Mrs. Ini Abimbola, for taking us through this so seamlessly and ensuring that we were all actively involved. I thank all the participants, the programs committee, and of course the headquarters for putting this together. Just for information, particularly for the participants, I'd like to just run through a few of the upcoming events. We have the NBCC Real Estate Outlook 2023 coming up on the 22nd of February. That is themed Pitching Your Tent post-2023 elections. This will be a very, very interesting event as it would include a lot of top players in the sector. Frank Okosun will be talking about the real estate market, how things would evolve. Mr. Olurogba, Urimalade, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, and a host of others would be also taking us through that. It's also important that we also register to attend the NBCC training program, which is tagged the Positive Workplace, Culture, Productivity, Employee Engagement and Satisfaction. This is taking place on the 22nd of February and 23rd of February at the NBCC Plaza. It's for 2 days. Then we also have our trade mission, which is one of the most strategic business opportunities, and is themed Paving the Way for Growth. And the trade mission is taking us to London and Birmingham, and is scheduled for 21st to 27th of May. So if you are interested, would invite you to register as quickly as possible. I think it closes probably sometime today. Then, of course, I must mention the fact that we have our state-of-the-art facility in terms of our office complex, which is open to all. We have suites, we have halls available for rental. So for your corporate events, trainings, seminars, and meetings, please feel free to join us and make a reservation. And of course, more importantly, we'd love to get feedback from you on our programs. So you can follow the link and scan the barcode to fill the feedback form, which is also very important. And of course, if you're interested in becoming a member of the Chamber, please visit the website. It's nbcc.org.ng, or meet with any of the membership team at the registration desk, and they'll be happy to assist you. Finally, please follow us on social media to be informed about all the activities. Facebook, the link is there. Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and of course on both YouTube and WhatsApp. You could also reach us on any of the social media platforms. So on that note, I would like to say a big thank you to everybody, starting with the speaker, Ms. Rukaya El-Rufai, and our moderator, Mrs. Inia Bimbola, and all the participants who have joined us today. And I